Tron Ascension, the cancelled Tron Legacy sequel. This is what we could have got, but alas, we did not. In fact, we got Tron Aries instead. I always find these things fascinating. Back in the day, a good few years ago now, I had a series on this channel where I spoke about cancelled movies. I had loads of scripts that I managed to acquire. Actually begun with like Hellraiser scripts. I got loads of Hellraiser scripts. Cancelled movies, sequels that just, never came to be. And I always found it fascinating to see inevitably what films we did get versus what they cancelled. So I thought we'd take a look at this. This is on filmstories.co.uk. And I think it's worth taking a look at. You know, this is a bit of history, I guess, in a certain way, right? Like, it's something which we could have had. We didn't in the end. We could have had a sequel, but no, we didn't. It was going to be a Korra story, which was obviously the natural move, right? Like, that's the natural progression of things. Clearly, you don't set up two major characters that break the universe. Well, Korra mainly, but you don't set up the son of Flynn and a character that breaks the universe and then not pursue it. Like, that's dumb. So this was obviously the way that they could and should have gone. So let's take a look. Hit subscribe and all that goodness, right? So, as it says, Jared Leto was actually pivotal in getting Tron Aries made. But it seems he also had the script changed to turn his minor villain role into the new hero. So we can thank Jared Leto for that movie. Well done. Well done. Well done. So we'll scroll through some of this. This is just set up anyway. And anyway, so it says this. Directed with an architect's eye for clean lines by Joseph Kosinski, Tron Legacy was a sympathetic updating of the first film. The original Tron, written and directed by Steven Lisberger, was a sci-fi fantasy about a counter-culture programmer, Kevin Flynn, turning the tables on his corporate masters and transforming the dystopian virtual world of the grid into a utopia. So the sequel explored how the boomer generation's idealistic vision for the interconnected future, as represented by a now older Flynn, had run out of control. Flynn's obsession with creating a perfect digital frontier resulted in the creation of Clue, a digital being or program who takes over the grid, commits genocide against the new race of artificial life forms, pretty true, the isomorphic algorithms, or ISOs, and rules the place like a despotic emperor. Like, Tron Legacy is a good film, man. I love Tron Legacy. Anyway, so leading the rebellion against Clue were Flynn's wayward son, Sam, zapped into the grid much like his father was decades earlier, and the last survivor of the ISOs, the childlike Korra. Following a final conflict in the grid in which Flynn confronted the demonic version of himself, Tron Legacy ended with Sam guiding Korra through a portal and into the real world. Tron Legacy wasn't quite the box office behemoth. True, it did $410 million on a $170 million budget, so it didn't do great. But what could we have got? Well, Tron 3, or the work on it, was begun by screenwriter Dave DiGilio, taking over from legacy screenwriter Edward Kitsis and Adam Horowitz. Although a succession of screenwriters would turn in their own drafts, looking back at interviews with various actors connected to the sequel suggested that it would pick up Sam and Korra's story in the real world, admittedly after the second film's events, or immediately after the second movie's events, sorry. I'm really excited to see what happens to Korra when she's put into the real world, Olivia Wilde said in a 2015 Collider interview. I think it's an interesting concept. I'm fascinated by all the discussions of AI, and especially now with virtual reality becoming something that's like a personal device, I think it is the time to tell this story. It was also suggested that Cillian Murphy, who had an uncredited cameo in Legacy, could return in Tron 3, reprising his role as Encom boss Edward Dillinger Jr., son of David Warner's villain in the original Tron. By December 2012, screenwriter Jeff Wigatow had taken over from DiGilio, but that outgoing writer had left behind an idea that would become pivotal years down the line, a villain named Aries. There was a very different movie, Wigatow recently told CBR. That film was a real sequel a real continuation of Legacy, and it introduced a character named Aries, who was a much smaller role, but a real villain. By 2015, it seemed as though the production had settled on a script, and Tron Ascension, as it was titled, was well into pre-production by the middle of that year. Filming was set to begin in Vancouver, and there were reports that Jared Leto was in talks to play its antagonist, Ares. Events occurring elsewhere at Disney, however, soon stopped Ascension in its tracks. The studio had suffered a string of expensive flops. Mainly it was Tomorrowland that kind of binned the sequel off, but fine. So anyway, they say this. We were actually this close to filming, DiGilio recently told The Hollywood Reporter. We were in heavy prep at the time. And the guys were scouting over in Shanghai when Disney purchased Lucasfilm. So that just sucked the air out of the room because the biggest franchise in Hollywood was going to take their attention. It was a tough blow for us, who I've gotten to know through the process, came in and did a great job, great pass for me, blah, blah, blah. And things were rock and rolling, but it got shut down. So Kaczynski later said that Tron Ascension wasn't cancelled, but rather put in stasis. Yeah, and then butchered and changed. So one person who never forgot about Tron Ascension was Jared Leto, a self-described Tron superfan. He personally contacted Wugatow and began talking to him about amending the script to place more emphasis on the Ares character. Thus, what was a villain became the hero, and Ares was given top billing in the film's title. The first iteration of Tron Aries was a different movie, but it had a character named Ares that Leto was cast as while we were in pre-production. He really got his teeth into this character and really wanted to hold on to it, and ultimately came to me and said, let's just build a movie around this character. I want to understand this character, his origins. I want to take him to a very different place. So that's really the provenance and the origin of this specific film, is Jared's dogged persistence on getting it done, but also telling the story of this character specifically. So his ego. So according to Tron Aries production notes, Jared Leto officially signed on as the film's producer in 2016, and in the years that followed, he and fellow producer Justin Springer continued to push the project forward through the pandemic and then the Hollywood strikes. Directors came and went. Disney's regular Joaquin Roning was the filmmaker who finally called action on Tron Aries in January 2024. By this point, the script had long since written out Cora and Sam, though they do get a nod towards the end of the story. Interestingly, DiGilio told The Hollywood Reporter that despite the expansion of Ares' role, the overarching story remained the same. How? How does it? It's likely then that Tron Ascension would have seen Cillian Murphy occupy the place in the story taken over by Evan Peters in the finished film. Now CEO of his own self-titled company, Dillinger oversees a new laser technology that enables programs and weapons created in the grid to be manifested in the real world. But the tech has a flaw. Spawned programs or objects can only exist for 29 minutes. The story's MacGuffin is therefore a piece of performance or permanence code written by Kevin Flynn decades before his disappearance. In Tron Aries, it's Leto's character spawned from the grid as a high-tech soldier by Dillinger who goes off program and tries to hunt down the code so he can become a real human. Although we don't have access to any early drafts of the script, it seems likely that Cora would have had the Pinocchio-like character arc taken over by Leto, with Ares being the Terminator-like villain dispatched to stop her from getting the permanence code. Now that makes sense, actually. That makes much more sense, doesn't it? Olivia Wilde's wide-eyed performance was one of Tron Legacy's highlights, and it's easy to imagine a story in which Cora learns to adapt to the real world and her new physical body, but according to Wugatow, Leto told him that, I want to do a Tron film that basically leaves all of the mythology on the side. It's entirely focused on this character, and it builds this character up from the ground. What a fucking egomaniac. Madness. So a late scene involving 1980s style grid and a cameo from Jeff Bridges was said to have been a late addition, following suggestions that Tron Aries' connection to its predecessor was too tenuous. Ah, that's madness. That's crazy. God damn. That's so bad. Well done, Jared, mate. You killed it. Jared Leto, you killed the film. And Disney for allowing that to happen as well.